Yeah, Seattle's a great team, great team, and it's hard to play here. And so we knew that. We knew that they just came off kind of a bad loss against LA, and so they were hungry.
This is Ballgorithm USA, where the game breathes and legends rise. The sound was already electric long before the opening tip. Seattle knew what was coming, a fever team catching fire, riding high on a 4-game win streak, and now ready to take the league by storm. And tonight, with more than 18,000 strong packing the arena, the energy wasn't just felt. It was lived, breathed, roared through the walls. The Indiana fever came out like a storm within the storm, fast, precise, connected. The crowd may have been loud, but the fever, they were louder in their silence. It was the kind of quiet control that comes from a team in sync, when every pass feels rehearsed but isn't, when every cut feels scripted but comes from instinct, when the game becomes poetry written in motion. McDonald saw it early, a pocket of space, a moment of clarity. And like a conductor guiding the opening note, she found Howard with a lead pass that sliced through Seattle's defense. And Howard? She didn't miss. Layup, statement. Then came the rhythm. On-ball screens flowing into double switches. Kelsey Mitchell carving her lane, dragging defenders like gravity pulling stars, only to dish back to the perimeter where the ball didn't stick, it danced. Indiana's ball movement was clean, patient, brutal. You could feel it. The passes weren't just smart, they were purposeful. Inside out, backdoor, high-low, it wasn't a fence. It was a fence reimagined. Boston, the anchor and the artist, read the play before it was born. A deflection, more like a prediction. And in a blink, she had the ball and pushed it forward. McDonald again, darting through the lane like a hot knife, laying it in before Seattle even turned their heads. The Fever weren't waiting for the Storm to play. They were dictating the terms from the jump. McKay bounces it down low. Howard again. Another finish. And you could feel the Storm's defense beginning to crumble under the weight of relentless execution. It wasn't one star doing damage. It was all of them. It was everyone. And that made them terrifying. Boston, standing tall at 6'4", moved like a guard. Her vision wasn't about seeing the open player. It was about making the defender believe there wasn't one. A flick of the wrist, and Howard had another one. Easy bucket, same result. And the thing about this Indiana Fever team, they're not flashy for the sake of highlight reels. Their brilliance comes from cohesion, the I, kind of trust that takes time to build, and once it's there, it becomes damn near unstoppable. Players weren't just running plays. They were reading each other, thinking ahead, trusting that the teammate would be there when they turned. And when Cunningham slipped backdoor on Diggins, clean, subtle, ruthless, it wasn't just a score. It was a reminder. This team has depth, and everyone on this floor can hurt you. The game stretched on, but Indiana never lost their grip. They weren't sprinting ahead. They were gliding, pressing only when needed, pulling back only, to slingshot forward. The crowd noise rose and fell like tides, but even the roars of Seattle's faithful couldn't rattle this fever. Bibby checked in and dropped a dime from the high post, a perfect high-low pass that found Boston cutting through the defense. Like a whisper, one more assist, one more basket, another layer added to this orchestra of basketball. Williams tried to answer, attacking hard, trying to shake the momentum. But she was swallowed, the paint clogged, options gone. Her follow-up effort landed right in Bibby's hands, as if the ball itself knew where it belonged. And then, it swung. Left corner, top of the key, bang. Cunningham drills a three. The Storm had the second-best defensive rating in the league, but on this night, Indiana didn't care. They weren't concerned with stats. They were carving out moments, one possession at a time, every switch, every pass, every closeout. It mattered. And the scoreboard? It was only a reflection of what the eyes already knew. The Indiana Fever weren't just playing good basketball, they were redefining it, piece by piece, quarter by quarter. You could see it in the way they moved without the ball. in the way they celebrated assists more than buckets, in the way even bench players were standing, locked in, fully alive in the moment. By halftime, the message was clear. This wasn't luck. This wasn't hot shooting. This wasn't one player going off while everyone else watched. This was Indiana, as a team declaring, "We're here, we're built, and we're just getting started." The second half was still to come. Adjustments would be made. Momentum would swing. But one thing was now undeniable. The energy hadn't cooled. It had only shifted, deepened. The kind of electric charge that doesn't jolt but simmers beneath the surface. As the second quarter unfolded, the arena wasn't reacting anymore. It was anticipating. The fans, in Seattle over 18,000 strong, didn't need prompting. They could feel that something was building, but so could Indiana, and they were the ones stirring the storm. In the huddle, strategy echoed with calm precision. "They're heavy in the paint." The words came not with concern, but opportunity. "We've got post presence. They have to cover us. Let's keep the ball moving. The weak side's wide open." These weren't just tactics. This was the sound of a team reading the battlefield, understanding exactly where the cracks were forming. And right out of the timeout, they proved it. Howard orchestrated from the elbow, and with surgical vision, she dropped a no-look dime inside to Dunnis. One fluid motion, catch, gather, finish. Poetry through traffic. Seattle was long. Seattle was athletic. That much was known. But Indiana didn't care. Their ball movement didn't rely on beating defenders off the dribble. It relied on forcing defenders to make impossible choices, cover the cutter or the corner, the post or the skip. And every time Seattle hesitated, Indiana punished them. The mismatch inside was real, and Dunnis knew it. Her frame was imposing, long, wide-shouldered, confident. She didn't overpower, she manipulated angles. She read footwork like a language. One seal, one bounce, and Seattle's length meant nothing. And then came Cunningham, again. The same rhythm, the same cold-blooded poise. Catch, rise, release, splash. Another three, no emotion, just execution. And behind her calm was an engine running at full throttle. But Seattle, to their credit, refused to let the game slip. They trapped the pick and roll, forced the ball out of hands, tested every read. And still, Indiana found a way. Even with the defense pushing up, clogging lanes, the fever adjusted. It wasn't about overpowering anymore. It was about persistence. No team had led by more than 4 points all night. Every possession felt like a swing. And in games like this, rhythm becomes everything. That's where Kelsey Mitchell entered the picture. Up to that point, she'd been quiet. Uncharacteristically so. Shots hadn't fallen. Looks that usually felt automatic were rattling out. But no panic. Not from her, not from the bench, not from the coach. "She's fine," came the sideline response. "She just doesn't need to overthink. She'll get popping." And when that ignition finally hit, it lit everything up. It started with subtle things. The hesitation drive that didn't finish, but forced the defense to shift. The cut that drew an extra help defender. The bounce pass that nearly became a hockey assist. Mitchell wasn't forcing, she was building. And then came the moment. The defense sagged. Just a breath, just a misstep. And Mitchell exploded. One hard dribble, sliced through the gap, contact, finish, and one. And with that single bucket, it was as if the switch had flipped. It wasn't just points on the board. It was a declaration. "I'm here." The bench roared. The teammates rallied. The fans leaned forward. This wasn't just about individual redemption. It was about collective lift. The kind of moment that shifts. Momentum in a way you can feel in your chest even before the ball hits the net. And as Indiana surged forward, the Storm scrambled to reset. They had firepower, they had speed, but they didn't have cohesion. Not like Indiana. Not like the kind of chemistry that allowed rebounding guards like Lexi Hull to quietly dominate possessions. She wasn't just crashing boards. She was redirecting plays. One tap out led to a McDonald's sprint. And just like that, 2 more points. Everything was connected. From defense to transition, from hustle plays to highlight moments. Indiana wasn't winning through dominance. They were winning through consistency. Behind the scenes, stories continued to intertwine. Sue Bird, a legend in Seattle, had met Caitlin Clark earlier that year at a shoot-around. Unplanned, unexpected. And yet something shifted that day. You could see it in Clark's posture, in her quiet nod. Greatness passed hand to hand, like a torch without ceremony. And while Clark wasn't fully in this game, still working back, still not at full basketball activity, her presence lingered, not in stats, in spirit, in culture. The Fever were evolving. Back on the court, Mitchell now had rhythm. She slashed inside again, this time with a smoother finish, no foul needed. Her mid-range started humming. Her pace, once tentative, was now aggressive. The defense couldn't stay in front of her anymore, not without leaving shooters open. And this is what made Indiana deadly. It wasn't that one player got hot. It was what that heat unlocked. Cunningham now had space. Bibby could stretch from the high post. Howard was free to flash mid-block. Boston, watching, waiting, scanning, ready to capitalize. And then there were the intangible things. The grit on help defense. The rotations. That didn't need calling out. The switch at the top that came just a half-second early and erased a three-pointer. The kind of basketball that doesn't show up in highlights but wins games. Seattle through counters, defensive adjustments, offensive substitutions, isolation plays, but every run they tried to build, Indiana answered, and not with panic, with patience. You could see it in how they handled missed shots, no drop in, energy. No rushed possessions, just reset. Run the action, find the mismatch, let it breathe, let it cook. Bibby found herself open again, top of the key. Bang, another 3. Cunningham again from the wing. Splash. Then Mitchell. Hesitation. Crossover, step in, mid-range swish. Every bucket wasn't just a score. It was a message. This is a team that trusts each other. This is a team that plays chess when others are still rolling dice. By the closing minutes of the first half, it was no longer just a close game. It was a fight for rhythm, for identity, for control of the tempo. And Indiana, slow and deliberate, never let it go. They closed the quarter the way all great teams do. Smart, sharp, unselfish. McDonald drove, collapsed the defense, kicked it back out. Boston didn't even hesitate. Back to Bibby. One more to Cunningham. Wide open again. And as that final 3 swished through the net before the buzzer, the crowd didn't just groan. They understood. This Fever team wasn't lucky. They weren't hot. They weren't a fluke. They were here. Deliberate, dangerous, and fully dialed in. They didn't need a perfect game. They didn't need every shot to fall. They just needed heart. And they brought it in waves. As the final minutes ticked away in Seattle, Indiana wasn't playing for style. They were playing for survival, for grit, for legacy, for the kind of win that doesn't just go in the column, but carves itself into identity. And right in the heart of it, Natasha Howard. Cutting, spinning, twisting through bodies like she was carving through the storm itself. One of the toughest finishes you'll see. Through contact, through traffic, through Skylar Diggins' defense, bucket, foul, roar.